Jeff Todd here for MLB Trade Rumors. Today is Thursday, February 20th. Let's get you caught up. Now, do you remember when Kris Bryant had this grievance against the Cubs and the outcome was going to be important for whether or not he might be traded? That only finished up a couple weeks ago, and there were some early indications of trade talks, but things have been pretty dead since then. No real indication of serious chatter, and yesterday we learned information that really makes it seem unlikely that Kris Bryant is going to be anywhere but Chicago to open the 2020 season. Both Bryant and President of Baseball Operations, Theo Epstein, sat down, had a meeting. Afterward, Bryant said, "I don't expect to be anywhere but here." GM Jed Hoyer saying the same thing. All indications are from inside that organization that Bryant is going to stay home. They're talking about patting him in the leadoff spot. There's a bunch of talk about what things are going to look like for 2020 with Bryant in a Cubs uniform. And it's important to understand that when we interpret the information that comes from organizations and comes from public reports, you can't spend half of spring training talking about where a guy's going to hit in the lineup and then flip around and send him off to another team in just any old deal. Not saying it can't happen, but it would be pretty unlikely to see this sequence of events to lead up to a trade. So what does that mean for the Cubs? Well, last year was a dud, we all know that, but the talent is still pretty high. They still, on paper, arguably the best team in that division. Certainly strong challengers in there as well, with the Reds rising and the Cardinals still being a factor. And oh, by the way, the Brewers just officially announced their deal with Brock Holt. So a lot of talent still floating around, fairly evenly spread talent at the top of that division, but having a superstar like Bryant is certainly going to help. He's going to be motivated. The team's going to be motivated. Remember, there was no rush for the Cubs to trade him. If they still want to do a Mookie Betts-like deal, they can do it next winter or even at this trade deadline in the upcoming season if things don't go as hoped. So everybody was putting on a happy face yesterday with the Cubs. A lot of warm fuzzies there, but that does not mean Bryant is going to be signing an extension anytime soon. Of course, it's still hypothetically plausible. He says he wants to be in Chicago, and he says, hey, I haven't been turning down all this money like people suppose. We haven't had serious talks. But still, the expectation remains that the Scott Boras represented Bryant is going to end up on the open market eventually. Now, speaking of extension candidates and the open market, do you remember last year when everybody thought the Yankees would, could, should go out and get Manny Machado? He ended up signing for $300 million. Part of the Yankees' plan to replace Miguel Andujar, who was injured, was to go get some depth. And who did they get? Well, they ended up with DJ LeMahieu, among other players. 2 years, $24 million. And the guy came in fourth in the American League MVP voting last year. Did anyone see that coming? Because that was a little beyond anyone's wildest hopes, I think. A lot of people at the time called it a solid signing. It looked like a pretty good value for a guy who is a nice line drive hitter, but generally a below average offensive performer. Really nice glove. Well, he put it all together in New York. If you go look at the StatCast numbers, you'll see that he was trending up in terms of his hard contact rate, his exit velocity. That went through the roof last year, and the power came with it, as it did for some other players league-wide. But it was a career year offensively for LeMahieu, still an elite player with the glove. So, hey, DJ, one more year left on your deal. What do you say? Do you want to do a new one? That conversation has not happened yet, according to LeMahieu. He indicated yesterday that he would be open. He'd love to continue playing in New York, but the team has not yet talked to him about a new contract. Now, of course, those talks could still happen later in camp, or they could happen after or during the season that's coming up here. But it's an opportune time. Early in camp, things are getting underway. A lot of times we'll see the beginning of conversations if a team has interest. Now, it's not yet clear whether the Yankees have interest. One thing that the team has definitely prioritized in recent years is keeping roster depth and flexibility. So, do they want to lock in to a second baseman? Maybe not, but the good thing about LeMahieu is he's shown the glove can play at second, at third, and if he hits like he did last year, he could even be a factor at first base or the DH slot. He can move around is the point. You can definitely imagine the appeal of getting something done now. At the same time, DJ LeMahieu is a very, very tough player to value for both the Yankees and for him and eventually the open market. Now, if he goes out and has another amazing offensive season like he did last year, 20 plus home runs again, shows that was for real, then it's not too difficult to come up with some contract ideas. You maybe look at the Justin Turner deal from a few years ago. That sort of seems plausible. 4 years, $60 million, something in that ballpark, maybe a little more. But how do you value a guy like this who almost always was a slightly below average hitter with the Rockies, did have one big season before that 2019 breakout? It's a hard thing to do. I'd say at 31 years of age, he's going to be looking for some security, at least 3 years, maybe 4. No doubt the team would be looking for a pretty significant discount on what they have to pay him, but you have to think he's going to want more than the $12 million a year he got when he initially signed on. This is how you can start to imagine things perhaps settling out in that 3-year, $45 million range, perhaps giving the Yankees a bit of a discount, giving him a bit of security heading into an important season. And yeah, that's about it for today, folks. Not a big news cycle to cover yesterday. We'll see what happens today. Be sure to follow along at MLBTradeRumors.com and subscribe down below.